Welcome to Psychology to Live By. Today's a roundtable with some people who are clearly not difficult to talk to. And our topic today, in the second part of this Mastering Difficult Conversation series, is how do we manage ourselves? Our emotionally intelligent participants have watched the podcast, which you can see or listen to at my website, drchris.life, or wherever you stream your podcasts. But a quick summary now before we go into our question and answer. When we find ourselves in a difficult conversation, or even when we're anticipating one, before we can manage other people skillfully, the first task is usually to manage our own emotions and reactions. And the best approach is to be proactive. Such approach coping enables us to manage our own thoughts, behaviours, and emotions, and to take care of our own needs first. It then allows us to better manage the needs of the other person and of the conversation generally. And the key to this self-management is clarity of awareness. What's actually happening in the situation? Even if we cannot change the other person, we can always shift our own feelings and experience less negative impact from the difficult conversation. Am I feeling defensive or aggressive? Am I in a wait and see mode? Can I shift my state and therefore the direction of the conversation? Can I increase the trust and therefore move to a more we-centric win-win orientation? So if we can identify signs of distrust within us before our amygdala is fully activated, we can access the higher level brain functions where empathy, judgment, and more strategic social skills can predominate. This is emotional intelligence in action. So we might notice the early signs of threat or anger and deliberately quieten ourselves, take a deep breath, and recognize that our reaction is normal. It's a normal response from our threat system. We might literally take a break or go for a walk. Or we might self-compassionately thank our threat system for trying to take care of us. And we'll now assess things very carefully and intelligently. If you have time to prepare, you might meditate, get a massage or exercise, etc., just to shake the stress out of your system and regain some clarity of mind. Very often, our framing of the situation causes us more stress and anxiety than the situation warrants. When you notice your negative emotions, you can ask, is my thinking realistic? If it's not, we can edit our thoughts to make them more realistic. We might also ask, is my thinking helpful? For example, it might be wise to attend to different aspects of the situation that are actually more useful. To skillfully navigate difficult conversations, we can also identify what type of difficult conversation are we engaged in. Is it a what happened disagreement? Is it an overly emotional exchange? Or is one's identity feeling under threat? And the podcast goes into deeper exploration of this, looking at strategies to better manage oneself for these three types of difficult conversations. In summary, an essential step in managing difficult conversations well is managing ourselves well. If we can step outside our reaction and understand the dynamics playing out, we can then shift to a more realistic and more helpful state and thereby stand a better chance of managing others skillfully. Alrighty, so that's by way of summary. And now to my very lovely friends, let's jump straight in. Any observations or questions from the second podcast? Terry.
I'll go like first on this one. Whenever I'm dealing with my kids, I always take the point of view is this conversation helpful? Is it
Yeah.
needed? Is it required? And then dealing more with challenging conversations with adults, I find the most potent thing is to step outside of my reaction.
Yeah.
And it creates a natural pause. Sometimes it's viewed as, are you angry? Are you mad? In a roundabout way, it causes the other party to pause.
Yeah.
So my pause causes a pause on the other end because I'm not
Yeah.
reacting. I'm actually standing outside of it. I've split my conscious. and
Yeah.
I'm looking at my own reaction before I react.
Yeah.
And that can be profound, especially by avoiding going down the same rabbit holes that conversation might already have been down 100 times before. So it's
Yeah.
very good not only on the business side, but also in personal life.
Yeah. Very nice. A couple of things to say there, Terry. Yeah. First off, with the kids, but I would suggest with really anyone that just quick assessment. What's the purpose here? Is it to be helpful? Because very often, when we're not, we might be in some sort of negative emotional state ourselves, and we're trying to, be right or, you know, um, judgmental, etc. Right. So it's a super helpful question, especially, and the cue for it is always some sort of negative feeling in ourselves. Like if you, so a key skill is noticing negative emotion per se in oneself, right? And then developing this natural curiosity. Oh hell, what's going on here? You know, what's my purpose here? And as soon as you're down that path, you're starting to shift into that prefrontal cortex, and you're starting to. Now, the other thing I think is very interesting, this idea of stepping outside a little bit, being a little. And a couple of thoughts occurred. Like you mentioned, one context there was there might have been a history of some emotional reactivity between you and the other person. Well, you're putting a jimmy in the works of that. You're by not embodying the emotions that the person is expecting you to embody, it breaks that system, right? And I think that's really important. And it highlights again, what we looked at in the first podcast is that by a long margin, most of the communication's happening at this sort of body language, visceral, non-verbal level. And you're embodying more objectivity, more neutrality at least, is going to be inviting the other person. It's not giving them something to latch onto to get angry about or afraid of. That makes sense. So it's very powerful. What's that?
Unexpected.
Yeah, it's unexpected.
So it just throws off everything that they were about to say.
Yeah, yeah. And then, you can then be more explicitly constructive and positive and that can then invite them into that. So you're sort of moving them through that dashboard from very low trust to wait and see to hopefully a more playful co-creating conversation.
The only thing with that is once you've used that tactic, you can't use the same diversion more than 1 or 2 times.
Yeah.
Or they catch on to that, and that becomes part of the new pattern. So you got to constantly shift the pattern, separate your like self from like your own reaction.
That's true. Though I would say, just from our previous round table, once you've had 3 or 4 really positive interactions, you've now developing a bit more trust. So they're going to cut you a bit more slack.
If it's a rabbit hole you want,
Yeah.
awesome. If it's a rabbit hole that you're trying to break, you gotta keep throwing them off.
Yeah, yeah. Well, but there is more than one way to skin a cat, as they say. I don't know where that saying comes from.
Yes, that is also a Canadian saying too.
Yeah. Okay.
All
right.
I think it's generational more than cultural.
Yeah, I think cats are very popular these days on social media, so we better not use that saying. It might upset a few people. Who's next?
I'll go. I
Yeah.
kind of just piggybacking off Terry and the concept of trust. I really liked the conversational intelligence dashboard and like how that's a great visual of like where you want to get to or how you get to psychological safety.
Yes.
But so in order to engage in conversational intelligence, it would really seem that you need a high level of self-awareness and the ability to question your own beliefs. I think Adam Grant calls it the scientific mindset, where you can question your own beliefs, be curious of other possibilities. So I guess, how does that work if you have the self-awareness and the ability to question your own beliefs? How does that work in a conversation with trying to have those conversations with somebody who doesn't have that level of self-awareness like a narcissist. And I might be skipping to the next podcast, but
A little bit, but yeah. So, but I think I can wrestle it into this one. So, of course, in terms of managing our own emotionality with another person who is being, let's say, objectively difficult, they might be being manipulative, dishonest. They mean you ill. Let's say, because you mentioned narcissist, right? So really, you're not so much managing them as managing yourself now, right? You're minimizing you're creating, if I can construct a terrible metaphor, you're sort of coating yourself with Teflon, right? Because there might be a recognition. There's no way I'm changing them, right? Because they're what we would consider to be pathological symptoms of their personality, they value very highly, right? So they've got zero interest in change because they very much like the way they are. So you unless it's in their interest, they're not going to play nice, right? So when you realize that you're with someone like that, it's not about changing them, it's about protecting self. And there's no point getting upset because that's just the way they are. And so you move into this very objective space of how do I protect myself and protect other people around this person. Also, generally speaking, if you are dealing with that kind of really difficult person, you never go it alone. So your strategy is also, you get other people around you, because a person like that, one-on-one's most times going to beat you, right? Because they have endless energy to pour into conflict, and they get energized by the conflict, right? So it is, when you're in that situation, analyzing the dynamics, and you go, oh my gosh, this person is a sociopath, this person's a narcissist, they've got serious personality issues, or they're just, I don't know, you don't have to be psychologized, they're just a real nasty, mean son of a bitch, then you go, okay, my job here is self-care and extracting and protecting other people from this person. Right? Now, a harder thing here, just thinking about it, is one can still have compassion for a person like that without, in any way going soft in the situation, or, right? Because it can't be nice to be like that, right? They might get cheap thrills by winning and dominating. I mean, this is a much bigger philosophic question, I understand, but there is a sense in which a person like that is completely trapped and utterly lost in their personality framework. And but primarily the care in this conversation shifts from them to self and others. Yeah. All right. That's a curly one. That one, you would have been proud of that one, Chris. Speaking of Chris, what's on your mind?
Well, believe it or not, I might be building off of that one.
Oh yeah.
So when I think back about the difficult conversations that stay with me as ones that have been challenging, because generally I feel like I'm quite good at that, like step out or maintain an even emotional response and really be intentional about my reaction. I know Terry may or may not agree with that, and I've definitely noticed Terry use his technique with me in the past. But that notwithstanding, usually when I'm gearing up for a really challenging conversation, I'm preparing a lot, and I'm making sure that I'm doing the right things to moderate in those. And the ones that stay with me as really unsuccessful are the ones where my primary outcome is that win-win or like a harmonious, we reach agreement. And the outcome is that that agreement just can't occur, whether it's because I'm, for one reason or another, not in a position where I can accommodate or I can um, a compromise, or the other person is coming in absolutely not willing to compromise and not willing to regulate. And it might be maybe in those conversations I'm dealing with the type of person like you've described in the past that is just not willing to
Yeah.
get there, and for one reason or another is just going to be belligerent, and that becomes just this emotionally exhausting thing where you're constantly trying to regulate and keep the temperature down, and they're constantly trying to escalate. And
Yeah.
what got me thinking about this is like, is that inherent objective in those dynamics of hoping for a harmonious outcome the wrong objective to have? And should it more be about, as you say, that preservation of self, get the message across and just hit the road, so to
Yes.
speak, in
Yeah.
the
No, I
conversation?
think that's right, actually. The whole point of objectivity is to discern what is actually playing out here.
Mhm.
And you can invite people, and this again, we'll come back to this in the next. You can invite people to shift, but you can't make them, right? And there is an ideal. Obviously, the world would be a better place if we're in win-win conversations and co-creation and experimentation and playfulness. But it's just not going to happen all the time because some people, for whatever reason, are not willing to go there. The trick for us is to not get too upset by that. Right. And, the Buddhist notion of equanimity, I think, is helpful here because it's about just recognizing, well, it's just the way it is. In the therapeutic situation, there are often people, who, not to, I can kind of see ways that their life would be much better. And if they looked at things in various ways, they'd be happier, but they choose not to. And I respect that. But also, it'd be crazy for me to get too upset by it, because you can't make people. And also, it's crazy to be upset. There are some people, I think, who are born pretty nasty. They get the short straw from genetics or from family history, and, I think we have to accept that there's dangerous and nasty people in the world. And we're not going to get win-wins with everyone. So that's a kind of idealism. And if you think about it, I don't know, sometimes it involves a feeling of failure. So in other words, our own ego gets sucked into the equation, and I should be able to shift people.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so a lot of this emotional intelligence is actually about getting the ego out of the way and just saying, what's the wiser thing to do here? What's going to be most helpful, i.e. it's less and less about self. And if it's like that, you go, I see. The person doesn't want to move. I got it. Okay, well, that's an option for them, but it's not a reason for me to hand over my emotional well-being to them. Yeah. Excellent. Well, guys, I think that's very, very, nice questions and deep questions that have come out of this. And I look forward to our third on this series when we start actually shifting more, where I can feel the gravitation is taking us. How do we shift other people? But as always, I thank you. It's very pleasurable having conversations with you, and I look forward to our next one.
Thanks.
Take care.
Bye.